I still remember the taste of that bitter tea, the kind of bitterness that doesn't belong to leaves or herbs, but to intentions. My mother placed the cup before me with a softness she never used unless she was preparing a lie. It was too careful, too deliberate, like she was setting the final piece of a trap she'd spent years designing. The moment her fingers left the porcelain, the air in the kitchen changed. Heavy, expectant, watching. We were supposed to leave within the hour. The entire family would gather for the reading of my father's will, the event she had dreaded since the day he died. She pretended grief, but behind every sigh I saw fear. Fear that he might have left something behind that she couldn't control. She'd spent decades shaping our lives to fit her script. The idea that his last words might expose her always made her jaw tighten. But that morning, she was almost serene. I lifted the cup. Steam rose in thin, twisting lines, carrying a smell that didn't match any tea she'd ever brewed. It had a sharp edge, like crushed pills mixed with orange peel. My instincts trembled, and for a moment I considered setting it down. But then she smiled. That small, rehearsed smile she used in front of neighbors and priests, softened at the corners, false at the center. It pushed me to drink just to prove I wasn't paranoid. The tea touched my tongue, and bitterness bloomed instantly. It crawled down my throat, leaving a metallic trace that clung to the back of my mouth. I grimaced. She didn't react. She stood behind me, arms crossed lightly, as if waiting for something only she knew was inevitable. "You didn't sleep," she said. "You look pale. Drink. It'll help your nerves." Help. A strange word from her. My mother didn't help. She moved pieces on a board and called it parenting. I took another sip, then another, trying to ignore the way my chest felt tighter with each swallow. It was probably stress, I told myself. Too much grief. Too much resentment. Too many nights spent wondering what my father had meant in that final conversation we shared. He'd been sick, mind wandering, but he had grabbed my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Be on time when it matters." I didn't know then that he was warning me. Now, staring into the tea, I wished I had listened more carefully. The room shifted slightly, like the floor had exhaled beneath me. The clock on the wall ticked louder, each click echoing in my skull. My fingers tingled. My vision blurred at the edges, softening into shapes that didn't hold still. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but the sensation only deepened. "Mom." "What's in this?" I asked. My voice sounded wrong, thick, heavy, dragged down by something invisible. I pushed my chair back, but my legs didn't cooperate. They felt stuffed with damp sand. I gripped the table, but even the wood seemed to sway beneath my fingers. She stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was gentle in a way that made my skin crawl. "You should lie down," she murmured. "You're trembling." I wasn't trembling. I was fading. Heat surged through my body, followed by an icy wave that washed over my spine. My head dropped forward. The kitchen dissolved into smears of light and shadow. The refrigerator hummed like a distant engine. My heartbeat slowed, each thump too far apart, as if someone were turning a dial inside me. That was when I realized what she had done. She had drugged me. My mother, the woman who used to hover over me like a storm cloud, had finally crossed the invisible line I always prayed she would avoid. Maybe she believed I wouldn't notice. Maybe she believed I couldn't fight back. Maybe she believed she deserved everything my father left behind, and I deserved nothing. I tried to stand. The chair scraped. My knees buckled. The cup slipped from my fingers, rolling across the table and spilling the last of its poison. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at it. Her eyes were fixed on mine, calm and certain, as if she'd already accepted the outcome. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "Just rest. Everything will be over soon." Over. The word echoed. I reached for my phone on the counter, but my arm barely lifted before collapsing back onto my lap. The darkness crept in faster now, swallowing the room inch by inch. My thoughts scattered like pages in a storm. Every instinct screamed to fight, but my body no longer belonged to me. My mother leaned down, her face the last thing my fading vision could still shape clearly. Her expression was almost victorious, the expression of someone who believed she had finally silenced the one person who could ruin her plans. My cheek hit the table. My vision tunneled. Her hand brushed a loose strand of hair from my forehead with terrifying tenderness. And my final conscious thought, the one that burned itself into my mind just before the darkness consumed me, was simple, cold, and true. She didn't want me late. She wanted me gone. I woke to the unfamiliar smell of detergent, sharp, synthetic, nothing like the lavender my mother used at home. For a moment, I didn't even realize my eyes were open. Everything was white. The ceiling, the walls, the curtains drawn tightly shut as if someone feared sunlight more than thieves. My mouth felt like it had been filled with sand and left to dry. My head throbbed with a slow, suffocating pressure, the type that comes after bad decisions or dangerous people. I blinked. The room didn't change. A hotel room. The sheets were too crisp, too tucked, too perfectly aligned to belong anywhere else. The faint humming of an air conditioner pressed against my ears. I tried to sit up, but my muscles responded like they'd just run a marathon I couldn't remember. I pressed my fingertips into the mattress, grounding myself, willing my breathing to even out. The first thought that hit me wasn't, "Where am I?" It was, "She really did it." My mother. The fog in my head made remembering difficult, like trying to grasp smoke, but the bitter tea came back in flashes, the taste, the dizziness, the moment my body betrayed me. She'd drugged me. My own mother had drugged me. And now I was here, in a hotel I had never seen before, dressed in clothes I didn't remember putting on. My heart slammed into my ribs hard enough to make me gasp. I scanned the bedside table, and that's when I saw it. A hotel key card. Blue, with the name of some chain I didn't recognize printed in gold letters across the front. Beneath it, a dead phone. Mine. The screen was black as a burial stone. I grabbed it, hands trembling, and pressed the power button. Nothing. No charge, no life. No connection to the world I needed to reach desperately. I looked at the clock mounted on the opposite wall. Its red digital numbers glowed like an accusation. 9:45. For a moment I didn't understand. The numbers felt meaningless, floating without context, and then it slammed into me like a punch to the chest. 15 minutes left. 15 minutes until the will reading. My blood froze. She hadn't just wanted me unconscious. She wanted me absent. She wanted me to miss the one moment my father had made clear was important. She wanted the room to fill with her voice alone, her story, her excuses, her lies. I swung my legs off the bed, wobbling as the floor swayed beneath me. The drug hadn't fully left my system yet. It clung to my nerves like invisible chains. But panic is a hell of a motivator, and fear carved strength out of places I didn't know existed. I stumbled toward the door, gripping the wall to keep myself upright. My body felt like it belonged to someone else. My throat tasted of bitterness and betrayal. Every second ticked louder and louder in my skull until it became a drumbeat pushing me forward. When I yanked the door open, cold hallway air slapped me in the face. The corridor was empty, eerily quiet except for the distant hum of an elevator descending. I didn't wait for it. I flew down the stairwell instead, gripping the railing as my vision tilted dangerously. My footsteps echoed like frantic heartbeats bouncing between concrete walls. By the time I reached the lobby, a wave of nausea rolled over me. I swallowed it down and forced myself into the open sunlight. The brightness burned, forcing me to squint. Heat clung to the pavement, thick and suffocating. A taxi idled near the entrance. The driver stood beside it, smoking lazily, completely unaware that my entire life was hanging off the edge of a cliff. "Please," I gasped, stumbling toward him. Take me to the city, fast." He blinked, cigarette dangling from his lips. "You okay?" "No," I snapped. "But that doesn't matter. Please, I'm begging you." Maybe he saw the desperation in my eyes, or the unsteady way my legs shook, or maybe he simply sensed a fat tip in his future. Whatever it was, he flicked the cigarette away and unlocked the door. I climbed inside, gripping the seat as if the whole car might vanish if I let go. He slid behind the wheel and checked the map on the dashboard. His brows shot up instantly. "That's 50 kilometers, he muttered. 50. My pulse roared in my ears. I would never make it. Not in time. Not with traffic. Not with the sun already high and mocking. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. My father's voice echoed in my mind, a shadow of a whisper. "Be on time when it matters." "It matters," I whispered. "Just drive. Please." The taxi lurched forward, tires screeching slightly as we merged onto the road. My palms were slick with sweat. I wiped them on my clothes, staring out the window at the blur of fields and asphalt speeding past us. Every kilometer felt like a drop of sand slipping through an hourglass I couldn't flip back over. My heart pounded with a single, desperate truth. She tried to trap me, but I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The taxi shot forward like it had been slapped awake, and the moment we merged onto the highway, the world outside the window blurred into streaks of green and gray. My pulse thudded in my throat, each beat measuring how much closer or farther I was from the one moment that could unravel everything my mother had tried to orchestrate. I sat upright, gripping the handle above the door as if it could tether me to sanity. The driver threw me hesitant glances, probably wondering whether I was escaping a crime scene, a bad breakup, or some sort of drug-induced nightmare. If he only knew the truth, that I was racing against a plan created by my own mother, crafted with cold intention, brewed in a cup of bitter tea. For a minute, all I heard was the engine's strained growl and the rush of wind slamming against the windows. My thoughts scattered like birds frightened from a tree. I tried to gather them, to force coherence, but everything kept circling back to the same paralyzing realization. She had planned this. She had prepared for this. My phone was still dead in my lap, the blank screen reflecting a pale, distorted version of my face. I kept pressing the power button as if stubbornness could magically create battery life. Nothing. No calls, no messages, no GPS, no proof, no way to warn anyone. 50 kilometers, the driver muttered again, almost to himself, as if the distance offended him personally. "You must really be in a hurry." "I am." My voice cracked on the last word. I cleared my throat. "I'm late for something important." His brows lifted. "Wedding? Job interview?" "Will reading." That got his attention. His eyes widened a fraction. I didn't expect sympathy, but something shifted in his expression. An understanding that this wasn't just about money. This was about blood, betrayal, legacy. "Ah," he said quietly. "Family trouble." I let out a humorless laugh. Something like that. Traffic thickened around us. Cars slowed. A line of trucks blocked the left lane like a moving wall. Each second felt like someone squeezing my lungs tighter. The driver cursed under his breath and switched lanes. We jerked forward in a rough acceleration that slammed me back against the seat. "Faster, please," I whispered. He pressed the pedal harder. The speedometer needle climbed. The hum of the engine turned into a vibration that filled the entire car, but the kilometers didn't disappear fast enough. Every time I looked at the dashboard clock, another minute taunted me. 9:51, 9:54, 9:57. My stomach twisted violently. I leaned my head back, trying to breathe. The residue of the drug still clung to my bloodstream, making my thoughts sluggish and sharp at the same time. My hands trembled. My vision pulsed at the edges, but I couldn't succumb now. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. The highway curved sharply, and the driver took it with a recklessness I silently thanked him for. Cars honked. He ignored them, threading between lanes like he'd been waiting his whole career for someone desperate enough to ask for the impossible. 10 minutes, he muttered. If we don't hit more traffic, maybe... We can't hit anything, I snapped, then forced myself to soften. Please, just do what you can. He nodded once, jaw tightening with determination. The scenery shifted again. Fields giving way to industrial buildings, warehouses, billboards that blurred into unreadable shapes. The city was somewhere beyond all that, waiting like a locked door I needed to break through. My breathing quickened. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the frantic beat beneath my palm. My father's voice drifted back to me. Memory or imagination, I didn't know. Be on time when it matters. Had he known she would do this? Had he expected it? Had he designed the will reading with her schemes in mind? The thought made a cold shiver run down my spine. It felt like he was guiding me even now, pulling me forward through the haze. The driver swerved to avoid a sedan drifting into our lane. "Hey, look where you're going!" he yelled out the window. I clutched the door handle harder, nails digging into my skin. A quiet panic rose in my throat, thick and suffocating. I imagined the will reading already starting without me. My mother sitting there, hands folded, pretending innocence, pretending concern, pretending she hadn't drugged her own daughter. The image made my pulse spike painfully. 9:59. "Please," I whispered again, barely audible. The driver didn't respond, but he pushed the car faster, weaving between slower vehicles like a man possessed. The closer we got to the city, the tighter the traffic pressed around us, like a final obstacle, like the world itself was conspiring to delay me. My palms were slick with sweat. A headache pulsed behind my forehead. The air in the taxi felt too thin. Then, as we crossed a bridge, the skyline came into view, steel, glass, and noise rising like a promise and a threat. My chest tightened. We weren't there yet, but we were closer. Too close to give up. Too far to feel safe. I closed my eyes just for a second, steadying my breath. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. Not today. The city swallowed us the moment we crossed the outer ring. Cars pressed in from all sides, boxed us into narrow lanes that felt more like traps than roads. Horns blared, tires screeched, people shouted from open windows as if chaos were the native language here. My pulse matched the noise, fast, frantic, on the verge of breaking into panic. "Hold on," the driver muttered, leaning forward as if that could make the taxi accelerate by sheer will. "Traffic's getting ugly." "It can't," I whispered. "Not now." But of course it could. The universe had a way of kicking people while they were already on the ground, struggling to stand. Red lights stared at us like unblinking eyes, daring us to try and fight them. Each time we stopped, my breath hitched painfully in my chest. I could feel the seconds slipping through my fingers like sand. I imagined my mother sitting in that notary office, hands folded neatly in her lap, expression smooth and dignified, an actress preparing for her grand performance. The driver glanced at me. Look, I can bend rules. I can't break physics. I swallowed the rising dread. Just go around them. Go around anything. He gripped the wheel. You sure? I met his eyes. Yes. That was all he needed. He jerked the wheel left, cutting between two lanes of cars, pushing the taxi through a gap so tight I heard a mirror scrape. A driver cursed at us. Someone honked nonstop behind us. I didn't care. I barely heard anything over the thundering in my skull. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every slow-moving truck was an insult. Every brake light ahead of us burned into my vision like a countdown I was failing to outrun. My mind kept replaying the moment I collapsed in the kitchen, the bitter taste of the tea, the way my mother watched me fall like she'd been waiting for that moment her entire life. That calm, victorious expression was carved into my memory now, etched so deeply I felt it every time I blinked. She really drugged me, I whispered, more to myself than to him. My own mother. The driver exhaled sharply through his nose. I've seen bad families, but that's something else. She doesn't even see it as wrong, I said. To her, I was just an obstacle. He didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. We approached another intersection. The light turned yellow, then red. He hesitated for less than half a second before slamming his foot on the accelerator. The taxi shot forward and sliced through the intersection as angry engines roared around us. Someone shouted out their window. The driver raised a hand without looking. My heart nearly punched its way out of my chest. He threw me a sideways look. You still want me to keep going like this? Yes, I said, without thinking. Whatever it takes. He nodded and pressed harder on the gas. Buildings rushed past in smeared blocks of color. Pedestrians blurred along the sidewalks like ghosts drifting through sunlight. My head still throbbed from the drug. My vision pulsed in waves. But adrenaline fought its way through the fog, clearing a path through the heaviness weighing down my senses. The taxi swerved around a delivery van, then squeezed between a bus and a motorcycle with only inches to spare. The driver was good. Reckless, yes, but controlled, like a man who had spent years maneuvering through impossible traffic with impossible deadlines. We hit another red light. He slowed just enough to check for cross traffic. No, I breathed. Don't stop. He didn't. We flew through it. The city air roared past us, carrying the smell of exhaust, hot pavement, and something faintly floral drifting from a roadside vendor. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Not for us, not yet, but it added to the mounting tension that stretched through my entire body. How far are we now? I asked, voice shaking. He tapped the map with his knuckles. If we keep this pace, maybe 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I felt the words like a blow. My father's will reading wasn't something I could be late to by even a second. His warning echoed in my skull. Be on time when it matters. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known she would try something. He'd planned for it. But had he planned for this? For drugging? For kidnapping? For being dumped in a hotel miles away? A car in front of us braked suddenly. The driver swore and twisted the wheel, skidding around it so sharply that my shoulder slammed into the door. Pain shot up my arm. I hissed through my teeth but didn't complain. The pain grounded me, reminded me I was still here, still fighting. We're close, he said. Just need to get past this next stretch. That stretch looked like a nightmare. A long boulevard lined with cars barely moving, headlights glowing like a serpent of metal and frustration. The driver cursed under his breath. "No way through," he muttered. "There has to be," I said. "Please, find it." He did. Without warning, he turned sharply into a narrow side street, bouncing over a curb. The alley was barely wide enough for the car. Trash bins lined the walls, windows were nailed shut overhead. But the road was empty, and the taxi sped through it, cutting behind buildings like a bullet fired through a tunnel. We shot out onto another road, clear, open, merciful. The driver grinned. "Shortcut!" I almost laughed, almost cried. It came out as a shaky exhale. The skyline loomed closer now, tall buildings glinting in the sun like teeth. Somewhere among them was the notary office. Somewhere inside was my mother, sitting tall and composed, ready to take everything. But not if I got there first. Not if I broke through every red light she'd tried to place in my path. Not if I fought until the very last second. I leaned forward, gripping the seat. "Faster," I whispered. "Please, just a little faster." And the city blurred again as we raced toward the truth and the confrontation waiting at its end. By the time the taxi screeched to a stop in front of the notary's office, my pulse felt like it was trying to hammer its way through my skin. I fumbled for the door handle, stumbled out onto the pavement, and nearly fell to my knees. My legs still weren't fully mine. They shook beneath me, weak from the drug, from the sprint through panic and adrenaline. The building loomed above me, tall and quiet, indifferent to the war raging in my chest. The glass doors reflected my disheveled appearance, tangled hair, pale face, clothes wrinkled from the hotel bed. I looked like someone dragged from a storm, barely standing, barely breathing. But I was here. I made it. I pushed through the doors, ignoring the surprised look on the security guard's face. The elevator felt too slow, so I ran up the stairs, each step slamming pain through my skull. The hallway stretched endlessly, like a tunnel meant to test how far a person could run before breaking. I reached the door with the gold plaque, Law Office of Demir and Sons, and slammed it open. The receptionist, a stern woman with sharp glasses and sharper judgment, looked up. Her expression tightened. "You're 10 minutes late." The words hit me like a physical blow. 10 minutes. 10 stolen minutes. I felt the world tilt again, not from the drug this time, but from the cruel symmetry of it. After everything, the poison in the tea, the hotel room, the 50-kilometer sprint, my mother had still won. I scanned the room, chest heaving, and there she was. My mother sat in a chair near the wall, her posture flawless, her hands folded neatly on her lap like she was posing for a portrait. She turned her head toward me slowly, her expression perfectly measured. The corners of her lips lifted into a smile so delicate, so polished, it made my stomach twist. A victory smile. My fists curled at my sides. I could feel every heartbeat in them. "You just missed the beginning," she said softly, as if it were a small inconvenience rather than the result of her calculated betrayal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to pull every lie she'd ever told into the light and show everyone what she truly was. But my voice refused to come. The notary, an older man with silver-framed glasses, cleared his throat to regain formality. He stood behind a wooden desk, a thick folder open in front of him. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock above his head, a clock that seemed to mock me with each passing second. "Please have a seat," he said politely, though I could see the confusion in his eyes as he studied my shaken state. I moved to the nearest chair, lowering myself slowly as my limbs trembled. My mother didn't look at me again. She didn't need to. She already believed she'd secured her victory. The notary adjusted his glasses and continued reading. His voice was calm, professional, unhurried. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Armin Dervish." Hearing my father's name was a knife to the chest. My breath caught. I gripped the sides of my chair so tightly I felt the wood dig into my palms. The notary's voice echoed around the room, every syllable thick with finality. My mother sat completely still, her face a mask of solemn dignity. Anyone who didn't know her would think she was a grieving widow, a pillar of composure. But I knew better. I'd always known better. My pulse roared in my ears. I kept waiting, hoping for the moment something would crack, that her confidence would falter, that the truth would pierce the mask she wore like armor. Then the notary said it, the words that cut the air like a blade. "My daughter has always been responsible and punctual. If she is late today, it means my wife has had a hand in it." The room froze. My mother jerked, just slightly, but for her, that was as dramatic as a scream. Her smile vanished. Her entire body stiffened. The carefully constructed facade around her fractured, and something raw and furious glinted in her eyes. I felt a shock travel through me, electric and overwhelming. My throat tightened. My father knew. He knew. The notary continued reading, unaware of the earthquake he had unleashed. "I emphasize the importance of time to reveal what she is truly capable of. I do not want anyone else harmed by her actions." My mother's lips parted slightly, as if she couldn't breathe. The color drained from her face. She looked smaller, diminished, fragile even, like someone who suddenly found herself exposed under a bright, unforgiving spotlight. For the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes that had never existed before. Fear. It crawled into her expression slowly, fighting against her practiced control. But it was there. Real. Undeniable. The room felt different now, charged with something sharp and dangerous. The ticking clock no longer mocked me. It mocked her. All those years she made me doubt myself. All those times she manipulated me. All the moments she twisted truth into weapons. And my father saw through all of it. 10 minutes late, but not defeated. I felt my breath finally return to me, shaky but strong. I straightened in my seat as the weight of everything shifted, no longer crushing me, but lifting. For the first time since I opened my eyes in that hotel room, I felt something close to hope, and something closer to justice. The notary turned a page, and the sound felt strangely loud in the quiet room. My pulse tripped over itself. My mother had gone still, statue still, her spine rigid, her fingers intertwined so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. She stared straight ahead, as if hoping she could will herself invisible. But the damage was done. My father's words were already out in the open, slicing through every lie she had ever layered over our lives. The notary adjusted his glasses and continued reading. His voice was steady, calm, neutral, yet to me, every syllable carried meaning heavy enough to crush me. "When I realized my time was short," he read, "I made peace with many things. But I could not make peace with the harm my wife has caused, nor with the harm she may continue to cause if not stopped." The words dropped like stones into the silence. My breath caught. My throat felt tight, as if my father's voice was being pulled straight out of the grave and into this room, speaking one last truth he couldn't say while he was alive. My mother's nostrils flared. A twitch pulsed in her jaw. The notary didn't pause. My daughter has spent years believing she was the problem. She was not. She is not. And I refuse to let her live another day doubting her worth because of the shadows cast by those who should have protected her. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. It was like something inside me cracked, not painfully, but with relief so overwhelming I almost doubled over. All the nights I cried in my room, convinced that I was the one who misunderstood things. All the arguments where my mother twisted reality. All the moments she convinced me I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional. He had seen it all, and he was speaking now when he couldn't speak anymore. The notary's voice softened slightly, as if even he could feel the weight of the words he was delivering. I wanted to create a test, he continued, a test to reveal the truth, not just for legal purposes, but for my daughter's heart. If she is late today, it is not because she failed. It is because my wife succeeded in her cruelty. The room shifted. The air thickened. I stared at the notary, but my vision blurred at the edges. My father didn't just suspect. He knew. He knew she would try something. He built the will around that certainty. He structured everything so her actions would expose themselves. My mother shifted finely, her breath sharp and angry. But she said nothing. Her silence felt like a confession. The notary turned another page. I regretted many things, he read on, but the greatest regret of my life is that I allowed my daughter to grow up thinking she had to earn her mother's affection. Love should never be earned. It should be given freely, and she never received that from her. A gasp slipped out of me, quiet, involuntary. My chest tightened with a pressure that nearly hurt. My mother flinched. That was the first time in my entire life I had seen her react to anything with actual pain. The notary cleared his throat gently before continuing, unaware of the emotional battlefield forming around him. I hoped, with time, my wife would change. But as the years passed, I watched her patterns deepen. I watched her resentment grow. And I watched my daughter suffer in ways I could no longer excuse. The words wrapped around me with a strange mixture of grief and comfort. I remembered the nights my father slipped into my room to whisper apologies for arguments that weren't his fault. I remembered him standing silently behind me during her tirades, waiting to catch me when I finally broke. He'd always known. But he hadn't been able to stop her. Not until now. The notary exhaled and read the next line slowly, deliberately. So I say this now. I believe my daughter. I always have. My vision blurred fully this time. Tears gathered, but they did not spill. They simply sat there, hot and heavy, as if waiting for permission. My mother made a small sound. Not a cry, not a word. More like a strangled breath shoved down her throat. She looked at me finally. Her eyes were hollow, wild, like someone watching their carefully built kingdom collapse inch by inch. For a moment, I saw something flicker there. Regret? Desperation? Or was she simply calculating her next move, trying to find a foothold on ground that was slipping away? The notary kept reading. I trust her judgment. I trust her heart. And I trust that once I am gone, she will see the truth that has always been in front of her. The clock ticked above our heads, steady, merciless. The notary placed a hand briefly on the stack of pages. There is more, he said, but if anyone needs a moment— No, my mother snapped, the word sharp enough to cut glass. Her voice trembled. She didn't want a moment. She wanted control back. I lifted my chin. Continue, I said quietly. This time, I didn't tremble. This time, it was her turn to shake. The notary gave a small nod and resumed reading, his voice steady once again. But in my ears, it wasn't his voice I heard. It was my father's, firm, gentle, unwavering. My father, the one person who had seen me, believed me, and loved me without conditions, was speaking through every page. And for the first time since his death, I felt him beside me again, not as a memory, not as grief, but as strength. The notary's voice carried through the room with a weight that seemed to anchor every breath. My mother sat rigid beside me, her spine straighter than I'd ever seen it, as if her entire body were bracing against a storm she never expected. I watched her fingers, normally so elegant, so controlled, twitch against each other in tiny, betraying motions. It felt surreal to see her shaken. For years she had been unshakable, a fortress of icy certainty. Now the cracks were spreading. The notary flipped to the next page. In the years before my illness, I kept a detailed record of the patterns I observed, he read. Not to shame my wife, but to protect my daughter from the future I feared she would face. A cold chill slid down my spine. My father had documented her behavior. My mother's head jerked a fraction, the only sign she understood the magnitude of that sentence. She opened her mouth slightly, maybe to protest, maybe to stop the notary, but no words came. She closed it again, drawing in a shallow breath that didn't quite steady her. The notary continued, oblivious to the quiet implosion occurring across the room. I noticed the manipulation. I noticed the way my wife would place blame where it did not belong. I noticed the cruelty delivered beneath a mask of concern. And I noticed the way my daughter began to shrink, to second-guess herself, to live in fear of the next moment she would disappoint someone who was impossible to please. My throat tightened. Memory after memory surged forward. Nights she made me believe I was ungrateful. Mornings she scolded me for emotions she claimed were weaknesses. Moments she twisted my words until I apologized for things I never did. I had spent so long assuming the fault was mine. But my father had been watching, quietly, silently, and he had seen everything. She did not fail, the will continued. She simply endured what no child should ever endure. My mother inhaled sharply, the sound cutting through the room like a snapped string. Her hands, folded in her lap, now trembled openly. She stared at the table, eyes glassy, as if each of my father's sentences peeled away another layer of her composure. The notary paused a moment, adjusting his glasses. I wondered if he sensed the tension, the way the air felt heavy, charged with something cold and electric. He cleared his throat. My wife often masked her actions as discipline, he read, but in truth, they were born from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being seen, fear that one day our daughter would understand her worth and no longer bend to her will. My mother flinched as if struck across the face. I had never seen her like this. Stripped of her usual detachment, forced to sit and hear everything she had built shatter piece by piece. She wasn't angry now. She was afraid. And not the kind of fear that comes from danger, but the kind that comes from finally being exposed. I regret, the notary read on, that I did not intervene sooner. I allowed too much silence, and silence, in the wrong hands, becomes complicity. A tightness formed in my chest. I thought of all the moments my father tried to soften the aftermath of her outbursts, how he slipped comfort into small gestures, tea, stories, gentle reminders that he was proud of me. He had been trying in the only ways he felt he could. However, the will continued, my silence ends with this document. My mother's breath hitched. I heard it. barely, but unmistakably. The truth lay between us now, solid and unmovable. "Let this be known," the notary read slowly, "so that no one else is harmed by her actions." A shiver ran through me. The words weren't just legal. They were a verdict, a warning, a final boundary my father set from beyond the grave. My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were no longer sharp or burning with anger. They were hollow, empty. Someone staring into a future she no longer controlled. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice scraping at the edges. He's twisting everything. He's making me." "For once," I said softly, "it's not your version of the story." Her lips parted, trembling. For the first time in my life, she had no retort, no manipulation ready, no armor to hide behind. She reached for a breath that didn't come easily. The notary continued reading, each line driving another nail into the coffin of her control. "Everything I write here, I write for my daughter's freedom." Freedom. The word hit something deep inside me, something that had been trapped for years without even realizing it. A knot I'd carried in my stomach for most of my life loosened, just slightly. My mother's face twisted, anger, fear, denial all colliding in an expression I'd never seen on her. She shook her head slowly, as if refusing the reality unfolding around her. But reality didn't care. I sat straighter. My breathing steadied. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing for existing. My father's voice, his truth, filled the room so completely that there was no space left for her lies. And I realized something as I watched her fight to hold herself together. She hadn't just lost control. She'd lost the narrative she'd spent her entire life constructing. She'd lost me. The notary cleared his throat, as if preparing himself for the next part, though he had no idea how deeply the words he was about to speak would cut through the room. My mother sat frozen, her expression drained of all color, her fingers splayed rigidly against her knees as if she needed the grounding. For a woman who had built an entire life out of maintaining control, losing it must have felt like having the ground split beneath her. The notary glanced at both of us before reading on. "After careful reflection and with full clarity of mind, I make the following distribution of my estate." The air tightened. My mother lifted her chin slightly, as if trying to reclaim even a sliver of dignity. But her eyes betrayed her, wide, restless, flickering with the realization that the moment she feared most was finally arriving. The notary continued, voice steady and detached. "From my entire estate, I leave my wife only the cabin in the woods." Silence. Not breathless silence, shattering silence. My mother's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to the notary, then to me, then back to the document, as if hoping she had misheard. Her shoulders rose in a sharp inhale. I knew the cabin he meant. A decaying structure, practically sinking into the earth, isolated, cold, empty. A place she adored only because it gave her absolute privacy. Privacy to be the version of herself she hid from the world. To everyone else, it was worthless. To her, it was sanctuary. "Let no one else suffer at her hands," the notary read. That line hit harder than anything that came before it. My chest constricted. My mother's face twisted, not into sorrow, but into disbelief. Then anger. Then something darker, more feral. Her control slipped further, revealing the truth beneath the polished exterior she'd always worn like armor. "No," she breathed. "No, he can't, he wouldn't." The notary didn't even look up. These are his written, notarized wishes. He was lucid when he signed. "He was sick," she snapped, voice cracking under the strain. He was confused. He didn't... This can't... It is, I said quietly. Her gaze snapped to me. Fury burned in her eyes, but beneath it, fear. Real fear. She searched my face as if I might provide her an escape, an ally, a lifeline. But this time, there was nothing for her to grasp. All her life, she controlled through intimidation, guilt, silence, pressure. Now the weight of her own actions pressed back on her, crushing the walls she had built around her selfishness. Seeing her like that, small, cornered, should have made me feel triumphant. But it didn't. It just made me feel tired. Like I'd been holding onto a rope for so long that letting go didn't bring satisfaction, only aching relief. The notary kept reading, unaware of the storm brewing only a few feet away. "That property shall be exclusively hers," he said, "and she is free to do with it what she wishes. No other portion of my estate shall be assigned to her." My mother inhaled sharply, a sound that bordered on a gasp. The reality settled over her like a heavy, suffocating cloak. Everything she had schemed for, the inheritance, the influence, the image, vanished with a single paragraph. Years of manipulation, years of her shaping narratives, years of her making me question every thought, every instinct, ended by a single documented truth. She shook her head slowly. "He hated that cabin," she said, as if that somehow proved her innocence. "Why would he leave me that? Why only that?" "Because," I said softly, "it's the only place you can't hurt anyone else." Her eyes widened. For the first time in my life, she looked vulnerable, like a child caught stealing, shocked not by her guilt, but by the fact that anyone noticed. Her lips trembled. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if trying to reassemble her mask, but it kept slipping. The notary cleared his throat. "There is one final section." My mother jerked her head toward him again, hope flaring briefly, desperate, irrational hope, the kind that grows when someone is drowning and believes the water might turn into air. But as the notary scanned the next lines, his frown deepened slightly, and I knew that hope was about to die. "He specifies," the notary read, "that this decision is made not out of spite, but out of protection, for both his daughter and any future individuals who might fall under his wife's authority or influence." My mother recoiled as if the words physically struck her. She opened her mouth, shut it, opened it again. No sound came. Her whole life was built on one idea, that she was right, that she was justified, that her cruelty was discipline, her manipulation was guidance, her control was love. My father's will tore those delusions apart. A tremor went through her. She lowered her gaze to her lap, and for a moment she looked like someone standing in front of a judge waiting for the verdict. And this was the sentence. Not prison, not punishment, but isolation. The very thing she forced on others now circled back to her. The cabin wasn't a gift. It was a consequence. My breath came easier. The air felt lighter. Not because she lost, but because finally, the truth had weight. The notary drew a slow breath, the kind a person takes before stepping into deep water. His eyes skimmed the next page, and something softened in his expression, just for a second, before professionalism snapped back into place. "My client also states," he continued, "that all remaining assets, investments, business holdings, and personal property will be entrusted to his daughter." The words hung in the air like a bell tolling. My mother's head snapped up so violently the chair creaked beneath her. She stared at the notary with a shock so raw it made her seem smaller, almost fragile. Her lips trembled, forming a protest that never fully left her mouth. "What?" she whispered. The room stopped breathing. "He can't," she choked, looking wildly between me and the notary. He wouldn't... Everything? All of it? The notary nodded politely, as though confirming a simple math equation. All remaining assets, yes. She let out a strangled laugh, high-pitched and unsteady. No, he was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. She jabbed a trembling finger at me. She poisoned him against me. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity, but no longer surprised. She would rewrite reality rather than accept any truth that didn't center her as the victim. I didn't poison anyone, I said quietly. But she wasn't listening. She surged to her feet, hands clenched so tightly the veins bulged under her skin. For a moment I saw something wild in her eyes, something dangerous. The same thing I saw the day she forced me to throw away a childhood toy because she thought it made me weak. The same thing I saw every time she punished me for emotions she claimed I wasn't allowed to have. "You manipulated him," she hissed. "You made him do this." The notary cleared his throat. "Mrs. Dervish, your husband prepared this will with full mental capacity. He passed every cognitive assessment required by law." She whirled on him. "Then he lied. He lied to punish me." "Or," I said softly, "he finally told the truth." She froze. Her eyes locked onto mine, sharp, wounded, furious. In them, I saw years of resentment, all the unspoken bitterness she'd fed like a pet that eventually grew into a monster. She never wanted a daughter. She wanted a shadow, a reflection, someone who followed orders without question. And now she was seeing what my father had always hoped I'd eventually understand. I wasn't hers to control. She sank back into her seat as if her bones gave out. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her breath came in ragged pulls, each one sounding like a plea for a world that no longer existed. The notary continued, slowly, respectfully, as if aware he was navigating the ruins of a life someone else had destroyed. Mr. Dervish made these decisions with a clear mind and, I believe, with a heavy heart, he said. He stated explicitly that he wished to protect his daughter's future. My chest tightened. I pressed my fingers against my knees to keep them from shaking. The notary flipped to the final page. He writes here that he hopes his daughter will use the estate wisely and not out of obligation, but out of freedom. He trusted you, Miss Dervish, more than anyone else. My breath hitched. Something inside me cracked, not painfully, but with a warmth that felt entirely foreign. My father had never been perfect, but he had loved me in a way my mother never tried to understand. And now, even from beyond the grave, he had reached out to protect me one last time. My mother stared at the wall, her breathing shallow. Her face was pale, drained of the color she always applied so meticulously every morning. Without her mask of control, she looked empty, reduced, like a queen stripped of her crown in front of her entire court. "He gave you everything," she whispered, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Everything. For years, she told me I was nothing. Now she was being forced to confront the truth she refused to see. My father didn't see me as a burden. He didn't see me as weak. He saw me as the one person worthy of carrying everything he built." She clenched her jaw, trembling with fury. "You don't deserve it. You don't deserve any of it." I looked at her steadily. "Maybe not in your eyes, but in his, I did." Her breath stuttered. She shook her head violently, like a child refusing a truth she didn't want to accept. "This isn't over," she snapped. "You think you won? You won't keep it. I'll challenge this. The notary raised a hand gently. "Mrs. Dervish, I must remind you that you were not the executor, nor the beneficiary. Your husband's wishes are legally binding." "This is a mistake," she cried. The notary shook his head. "It is not." She pressed a shaking hand to her forehead, breathing fast, as if the room were closing in around her. Seeing her unravel should have made me feel triumphant. Instead, it made me feel nothing. Just a quiet, echoing exhaustion. A lifetime of battles caught up in my bones. The notary slid the final document toward me. "You will need to sign here to acknowledge receipt." My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. My father trusted me. He believed in me. He left me everything, not as a prize, but as proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining the pain she caused. Proof that he saw me. Proof that he loved me. I signed my name slowly, firmly. When I looked up, my mother was staring at me with a hatred so cold it felt ancient. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. The moment the notary closed the folder, the room seemed to exhale. Papers settled. Pens clicked into place. The ticking clock above the door suddenly felt louder, as if marking the end of something larger than a legal proceeding. My mother didn't move. She sat as if frozen in amber, staring at nothing, her breathing shallow and uneven. I rose slowly, my legs stiff from the tension coiled inside them. The notary gave me a sympathetic nod, murmuring something polite, something about contacting him if I had questions, but his voice was faint, muted by the pounding in my ears. My gaze stayed anchored on my mother. She finally blinked. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it signaled the return of life to her features. She lifted her head, every motion sharp, brittle, like her bones might crack under the strain. The facade she carried for years, the elegance, the authority, the cold confidence was slipping piece by piece. She stood, not gracefully, not with her usual precision. She rose like someone yanked upward by unseen strings, her posture forced rather than chosen. Her hands hung at her sides, trembling. "You ruined my life," she whispered. The words were soft, but they struck with the force of a slap. I felt them hit, but they didn't sink in the way they once would have. They didn't burrow under my ribs like guilt or coil around my throat like shame. They simply fell. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined it yourself, years ago." Her eyes narrowed, anger flaring, then fading into something hollow, something defeated. She stepped closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough that I could see the tiny cracks in her expression, the fraying threads of control she couldn't weave back together. "You think you understand?" she said, voice shaking. "You think you know everything because of a piece of paper?" "It's not the paper," I replied. "It's his words, his truth, and mine." She looked down at the floor, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, her shoulders curled inward, making her look smaller than I'd ever seen her, like a shadow of the woman who once towered over me, dictating my every move with icy precision. Then she straightened again, but the motion was empty. Performed. A habit of pride rather than an expression of it. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say, no argument left to win, no justification left to give. We were standing on the final page of a story she authored, and she hated that the ending wasn't what she planned. She turned away. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, sharp, quick, brittle. Each step echoed through the room like a shrinking heartbeat. She moved toward the hallway with the posture of someone pretending dignity while drowning in humiliation. Her back was ramrod straight, chin lifted high, as if she still believed someone admired her, but no one did. Not anymore. When she reached the doorway, she paused, just for a heartbeat. I saw her shoulders rise in a shaky breath, then fall. Maybe she was searching for one last cutting remark, one final blow. But none came. She simply walked out, swallowed by the empty corridor. The door clicked shut. Silence. The notary excused himself, giving me the space he must have sensed I needed. I stood there alone for a long moment, letting the quiet settle into my bones. My hands shook, not from fear, but from release, like every muscle that had been tensed since childhood had finally let go. I looked down at the documents I held, my name printed in black ink, my father's signature, looping and familiar, his final message woven into every line. He believed me, he trusted me, he chose me. The weight of that was heavy, but not in the way burdens are heavy. It was weight like a blanket, warm, protective, grounding. I walked toward the window and pulled the curtain aside. The sunlight spilled onto my face, warm and bright. The city outside buzzed with life, uncaring of the tragedy and triumph unfolding in a small office on the 3rd floor. Cars moved, people hurried. Everything continued, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could join it. I breathed in slowly, letting the air fill every corner of my lungs. It tasted different now, cleaner, freer. My chest loosened. My shoulders dropped. Something deep inside me shifted. Something tightly wound finally clicking into place. It wasn't the inheritance. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the property. It was the validation, the truth, the release from a past that had bound me for so long I had forgotten what freedom felt like. I pressed my palm to the window, feeling the warmth through the glass. I was free. Not because she was gone, not because he left everything to me, but because the lies she built had finally collapsed, and I survived the fall. When I finally left the office, documents tucked safely in my bag, I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth returning to. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a beginning,